A poor boy was forced to marry a girl in a coma until she awoke and fell for him instantly. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain tapped softly against the high windows of Street Helena Medical Center, the kind of sound that made an already quiet place feel even more hollow. Inside the private recovery wing, the air smelled of disinfectant and cold metal. Machines blinked steadily, their soft beeps filling the silence like a tired heartbeat. Evan Miller stood in front of room 907, clutching a folder of legal papers that did not feel real in his hands. The sleeves of his cheap jacket were still damp. He had walked here from the bus station because he had no money left for a cab. His lungs burned, his legs felt heavy, and yet somehow the hardest part was simply breathing as he stared at the door. Behind that door was Liana Hartwell, 23 years old, daughter of the Hartwell family, owners of one of the largest healthcare companies in the state, beautiful in every photograph Evan had seen, and now silent, unmoving, trapped in a coma after the accident that had nearly taken her life. He had never met her, and yet, as of this morning, he was legally her husband. He swallowed hard. The moment replayed in his mind again and again, the Hartwell family lawyer sliding the contract across the table, the promise to cover his mother's medical bills, the cold explanation that a stable family image would help protect their company during the investigation of Liana's crash. All they needed was a compliant husband, someone quiet, someone desperate enough to say yes, and Evan had been exactly that. He pushed open the door slowly. The lights inside were dimmed to a gentle glow. Liana lay still beneath a pale blanket, her skin soft but colorless, her dark hair spread across the pillow like a memory of the life she used to have. The monitor beside her blinked with calm precision, each beep too steady, too lonely. Evan stepped inside, unsure whether he was even allowed to look directly at her. His heart pounded like he was trespassing. "Mrs. Hartwell," he whispered, the words unfamiliar and heavy in his mouth. "No. Liana. Your name is Liana." He set the folder down on the small table near her bed. His hands shook from exhaustion, but his voice softened as he took a hesitant step closer. "I do not know why life brought me here," he murmured, "and I know you did not choose this. Neither did I. But I promise you something. I will not take anything from you. I will not touch your future, or your money, or your name. I am only here because I had no other choice. Because my mother is sick, and because they said you needed someone on paper." A faint hum from the heater filled the room. Outside, the storm grew heavier. Evan sat carefully in the chair beside her, feeling the weight of the moment settle deep in his chest. "You do not know me," he whispered, "but I hope, if you can hear anything at all, that someday you will understand I am trying to do the right thing. Even if this whole thing feels wrong." He looked at her peaceful face, trying to imagine the life she once lived. He wondered what she would say if she opened her eyes and saw him sitting here, a nobody, a broke mechanic's son who could barely afford bus fare. His hand hovered over hers but did not touch. He did not dare. "I hope you wake up," he said softly. "Not because it will make things easier for me, but because you deserve your life back. You deserve to choose for yourself." The monitor beeped, steady and calm. Evan leaned back, exhausted, unaware that beneath the blanket, Liana's fingers twitched almost imperceptibly at the sound of his voice. A tiny spark inside the stillness, a quiet beginning, waiting to rise. The next morning arrived with a pale gray light filtering through the blinds of room 907. Evan had fallen asleep in the chair beside Liana's bed, his head resting awkwardly against the wall. His neck ached, his hands were cold, and the collar of his jacket was still damp from last night's rain. He woke up to the soft hum of machines and the steady rhythm of Liana's heartbeat on the monitor. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then, he saw her, lying as peacefully as before, and the heavy truth settled back into his chest. This was real. He was here, and he was somehow her husband. A quiet knock sounded on the door. A nurse with warm brown eyes stepped inside, carrying a tray of supplies. "Good morning," she said gently. "You must be Evan. I heard you came in late last night." He nodded, rubbing the stiffness from his eyes. I did not want to leave her alone. The nurse smiled with a softness that made the sterile room feel warmer. "That is kind of you. Many families come and go, but comatose patients do much better when they have a familiar presence. Some say they can feel it." Evan looked at Liana's still hand beneath the blanket. "Do you really believe she can hear anything?" The nurse set the tray down and checked the IV line carefully. "I cannot say for sure, but I have seen patients come back and remember voices they heard while they were unconscious. Your presence is not hurting her. If anything, it may help." Her words lingered long after she left the room. Hours passed slowly. Evan stepped out to the cafeteria only once, using the few dollars he had left to buy a coffee that tasted weak and metallic. When he returned, sunlight had moved across the floor, casting soft stripes over Liana's bed. She looked the same as before, and yet something about the room felt different, warmer, quieter, as if she was listening. He sat again, leaning forward. "I do not know what your life was like before this," he said, speaking gently so the sound did not disturb the machines. "But I looked at the photos on the wall outside, the charity galas, the award ceremonies. You seemed happy, like you had a purpose." He exhaled slowly. "I used to think I had one too, before everything went wrong, before the bills got too high, before the hospital told me they could not treat my mother unless we paid up front. When the lawyer offered to help, I knew it was wrong, but I also knew I could not watch my mother die." He let the truth settle in the air. No excuses, just reality. "I am not proud of how I ended up here," he said quietly, "but I will not let anyone hurt you or use you while you cannot fight back. I swear that to you." The room remained silent, except for the steady beep of the monitor. Later that afternoon, the chief physician stopped by with a clipboard in hand. He was tall, stern, and moved with the calm precision of someone who had seen thousands of patients and carried all of their stories in his eyes. "Her vitals remain stable," he said. "There has been no significant change, but stability is good. Stability means she is still fighting." Evan stood beside the bed, hands clasped. "Is there any chance she might wake up soon?" The physician looked at Liana with a thoughtful expression. "Coma recovery is unpredictable. Days, weeks, months, sometimes longer, but do not underestimate the power of environment. Talk to her, read to her, sit with her. The brain remembers more than we think." When the doctor left, Evan sank back into the chair. The sun had begun to dip, turning the window a shade of fading gold. The quiet pressed in around him again, but he did not feel alone anymore. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn paperback book. It was the only thing he owned that felt sentimental. His mother used to read it to him when he was little. He opened to the first page. "I do not know if you will like this," he whispered, "but my mother always said stories make the world feel less heavy. So maybe I can share one with you." His voice filled the stillness, steady and warm. Outside, the sky deepened into a soft evening blue. And for just a split second so slight that Evan almost doubted it, Liana's finger moved beneath the blanket. By the next morning, a soft rain had begun to fall again, tracing faint lines down the hospital window. Room 907 felt different when Evan stepped inside after washing up in the hallway restroom. The air was still, the machines steady, but something invisible pressed against the room, as if a shift had taken place during the night. Evan approached the bed slowly. Liana lay exactly as before, peaceful and unmoving. But he could not shake the memory of her finger twitching under the blanket, the tiny spark he had seen with his own eyes. He sat beside her, leaning forward, searching her face for any sign at all. "Good morning, Liana," he said softly. "I thought I imagined what happened yesterday. Maybe I did, but I want to believe it was real." He waited for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the monitor. A gentle knock interrupted the silence. Nurse Anna stepped in with a warm towel in hand. She smiled when she saw Evan already in the chair. "You are here early again," she said kindly. "I did not want her to wake up alone," Evan replied. Anna began her careful routine, checking the IV, adjusting the blanket, and brushing a strand of hair from Liana's forehead. Every gesture was soft, steady, almost ceremonial. "You know," Anna said, lifting the warm towel, "patients in comas respond well to consistent voices and gentle touch. Routine helps them feel anchored, even if they cannot show it." Evan watched as she gently wiped Liana's hands and arms, the steam rising like a breath in the cold room. "It is strange," he said quietly. "I feel like she is listening, even if she cannot move." Anna paused, then nodded. "Trust your instincts. Sometimes they are more accurate than machines." She finished her routine, gave Evan a reassuring look, and slipped out of the room. Evan turned back to Liana. "Well," he said with a quiet exhale, "I guess it is just you and me again." He reached for the paperback book he had been reading to her. The edges were frayed and the cover was creased, but it felt familiar in his hands. He opened to where he left off and began to read aloud, his voice steady and warm. As he continued, he noticed the faintest movement again, subtle, almost invisible, but real. Liana's eyelids fluttered. Not fully, not enough to wake, but enough to send a jolt through him. He lowered the book. "Liana, if you can hear me, keep fighting. I am right here." A few minutes later, the door opened and the chief physician walked in, carrying a chart. He glanced at the monitor, then at Liana, then at Evan. "She had increased neural activity overnight," the doctor said. "Nothing dramatic, but encouraging." Evan felt his heart jump. "So she is improving?" "It is too early to make predictions," the doctor replied, "but her brain is responding. That matters." When the doctor left, Evan stood beside the bed, gripping the rail as if holding on to hope itself. That afternoon, he found himself talking more than usual. He told Liana about the day he got his first job at a garage. He told her about the time he rebuilt an old motorcycle with his father, before the debts and the hospital bills tore everything apart. He told her things he had not said aloud in years. The more he spoke, the lighter the room felt. As evening crept in, and the hallway lights dimmed, Evan leaned close and whispered, "If you can hear any of this, I hope you know I will stay as long as it takes." His voice trembled slightly as he closed the book and set it on the nightstand. Then it happened. A tiny sound. A shift in her breathing. A soft, fragile inhale that did not sound like the others. Evan froze, his eyes widening, every muscle in his body going still. "Liana?" he whispered, afraid to breathe. Her eyelashes trembled again, longer this time, unmistakably alive beneath the dim hospital lights. And in that moment, Evan felt the first unmistakable sign that her world was beginning to return. The next 24 hours moved with a quiet intensity that Evan had never felt in his life. Doctors came in and out of room 907, running tests, adjusting machines, and speaking in low voices as Liana drifted in and out of partial consciousness. Each time her eyes opened, even for a second, she searched for the same thing. She searched for him, and every time, Evan was there. By late afternoon, the room had settled into a calm hush. The sunlight slanted in through the blinds, warm and golden, casting soft shadows across the sheets. Liana lay propped slightly upright now, her breathing steadier, her eyelids heavier but responsive. She still could not speak, but she tried. That effort alone made Evan's heart ache. He sat in the chair beside her bed, leaning forward. "Hi, Liana," he said softly. "I am here. You are doing incredibly well." Her gaze shifted toward the sound of his voice. She blinked slowly, her eyes following his movements with fragile awareness. The confusion in her expression had faded into something gentler, familiar, almost trusting. A nurse entered quietly to check her vitals. She smiled when she saw Liana's eyes open again. "You are making amazing progress," the nurse said warmly. "You must have someone very patient helping you." She glanced at Evan with a knowing look before leaving the room. Evan cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. "I am not sure if you know who I am," he said, keeping his tone calm and steady. "But my name is Evan. I have been here with you since the night they brought the contract to me. Not because I wanted anything from you, but because I could not walk away." Liana's brow tightened faintly, as if she was trying to reach into a memory just out of sight. Her hand shifted slightly on the blanket, her fingers curling inward. Evan noticed immediately. "Do you want to move your hand?" he asked gently. She blinked once in response. He offered his hand again, slower this time, giving her a chance to refuse. Instead, She brushed her fingertips against his, the same fragile gesture as before. But now, there was more intention, more connection. Evan held perfectly still as her touch lingered, light as the wings of a moth. "You are doing great," he whispered. "I know you cannot talk yet. That is all right. You can take all the time you need." A faint exhale escaped her, almost a sigh of relief. The chief physician entered then, carrying a tablet. "Her brain activity continues to rise," he said with quiet satisfaction. "She is responding to external stimuli, especially familiar voices. Keep talking to her. She is trying to wake fully." When the doctor left, the room grew quiet again. Evan lowered his voice, speaking softly so she could focus. "I want to tell you something," he said, "and maybe you can understand, even if it does not make sense right now." He inhaled slowly. "You were not supposed to wake up to a stranger sitting by your side. You were not supposed to have someone like me tied to your name. The truth is, I thought once you opened your eyes you would look at me with fear or anger." Liana blinked again, a long, steady blink. "Not fear, not anger. Something softer," Evan continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "You waking up, it means you get your life back, your choices, everything that was taken from you. And when you are stronger, I will tell you everything, every truth, no secrets." Outside the window, the sky had begun to darken, painting the room in shades of blue and gold. Evan reached for the small lamp beside the bed and switched it on. A gentle, warm glow washed over them. He sat back down. "I read to you yesterday," he said, lifting the worn paperback from the nightstand. "Would you like to hear more?" Liana's eyelashes fluttered twice, her clearest response yet. Evan smiled softly, opening the book. "All right. Let us pick up where we left off." His voice filled the room again, warm and steady, wrapping around her like a blanket. With each sentence, her eyes stayed open a little longer, her breathing stayed steady, and her fingers rested lightly near his as if she was trying to hold on to the sound of him. And in that quiet moment, as the rhythmic hum of the machines pulsed gently in the background, something unmistakable had begun to grow between them. A connection born not from choice nor obligation, but from the simple, undeniable truth that she had returned to a world where his voice was the first thing she trusted. The following morning arrived quietly, with thin sunlight slipping through the blinds and settling across the room like a soft invitation to a new beginning. Evan had not slept more than a few hours, but he did not feel tired. Something inside him was awake in a way it had not been for years. Liana's eyes had opened, she had reached for him, and now every second felt precious. When he stepped back into room 907, he saw her resting with her eyes half open, the slow rise and fall of her chest steady and calm. She turned her gaze toward him the moment he crossed the doorway. It was subtle, but it was intentional. "Good morning," he said softly, pulling the chair closer. "You are doing so well." Her lashes lowered in a slow blink, a fragile acknowledgement. A nurse entered to check her vitals and smiled when she noticed the way Liana's attention followed Evan. "She is responding very consistently," the nurse said. "Her awareness is improving. Keep speaking to her. It is making a real difference." After the nurse stepped out, Evan settled beside the bed, leaning forward. "I want to help you sit up," he said gently. "Only if you are ready." Her fingers curled weakly against the blanket, a small but deliberate sign. Evan raised the bed a little, making sure her breathing stayed even. She blinked again, calmer now, her eyes adjusting to the new angle. "You are strong," he whispered. "Stronger than anyone realizes." For a few minutes the room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the monitor. Then her hand moved, sliding a fraction closer to his. Evan paused, unsure if he should take the next step. "Do you want me to hold your hand?" A slow blink answered him. He reached out and let his fingers lightly touch hers, warm against her cool skin. She responded by curling her fingers around his, weak but sure. It was the smallest gesture, but it felt like a turning point. Hours passed gently. The physical therapist arrived to help her try a few small movements. Simple things, lifting a hand, turning her head, following a light with her eyes. Each action took effort, but each one was progress. Evan stayed beside her, offering quiet encouragement. "You are doing amazing," he said after she managed to raise her hand a full inch off the blanket. I am proud of you. Her breathing hitched slightly. The emotion in her eyes shimmered through the exhaustion. Later, when the therapist left, the physician returned to review her scans. She is showing significant improvement, he said. Her recovery may progress faster now that she is conscious and responsive. Evan felt the weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by something hopeful and bright. After the doctor left, Liana shifted again, her gaze drifting between the window and Evan. She looked as if she was trying to understand everything around her, as if her mind was slowly piecing together the world she had returned to. You must be confused, Evan murmured, keeping his voice calm. You woke up, and the world must feel unfamiliar. But you are safe, and I am here. Her eyes filled with something soft, something searching. He hesitated for a moment. He wanted to be honest, but he knew she was still too weak to understand everything at once. You do not know me yet, he said, but I promise you that I will explain everything when you are stronger. For now, just focus on healing. Her lips parted slightly as if she was trying to form a word. No sound came out, but the intention was there. Evan's heart tightened. It is all right, he said quickly, leaning closer. You do not need to talk. You just need to rest. Her hand tightened around his for a brief second, as if she was trying to tell him something that her voice could not yet carry. The light outside shifted toward late afternoon, casting a warm glow across her face. She watched him with a tired but unwavering focus, as if he was the one fixed point in a world she was still relearning. Evan squeezed her hand gently. You came back, he whispered, and I am not going anywhere. Her eyes softened. In that quiet room, surrounded by the steady hum of medical machines, something deeper began to take root. A bond formed not through words but through presence, courage, and the quiet miracle of her returning to life with him as the first face she truly saw. And neither of them realized yet that this fragile connection was only the beginning, because the moment she regained the strength to speak, the truth waiting outside room 907 would start to unravel everything. The following day brought another step forward. Liana stayed awake for longer stretches, her eyes following movement with clearer intention. The doctors were encouraged, the nurses were delighted, and Evan felt something he had not felt in years, hope. By noon, she had regained enough strength to lift her hand on her own. It was still shaky, but it was movement she controlled. When she reached toward the bedside cup, Evan was already there, helping her lift it carefully so she could wet her lips. You are improving so quickly, he said softly. She blinked once, slow and steady, her version of a smile. But with recovery came something else, something neither of them had been ready for. Memory. Short flashes at first. Her eyes would drift to the window as if she recognized the light. Then she would stare at the wall where the certificates and photographs of her accomplishments hung. Her expression tightened, searching through the fog in her mind. In the late afternoon, after the nurses stepped out, her gaze settled on Evan with a different kind of focus, a deeper one. She stared at his face for several seconds, her brows pulling slightly together. He leaned forward. Liana, he said gently, are you remembering something? She opened her mouth. No sound came out, but the effort was stronger this time. She tried again, forming the shape of a word that Evan could not decipher. Her frustration showed in the tension of her jaw. You do not have to force it, he whispered. Take your time. But she shook her head a fraction, her first true indication of disagreement. Her eyes shone with urgency. She wanted answers. And for the first time since she woke, Evan felt fear edge into his chest, because the truth he owed her was heavy, complicated, and cruel. Just then, the door opened. The Hartwell family lawyer stepped into the room with a polished briefcase, his expression tight and professional. Mr. Miller, he said with a stiff nod. We need to speak. Evan stiffened. He did not want this conversation, not like this, not in front of her. But the lawyer continued, ignoring the tension in the air. The board expects a statement now that Miss Hartwell has regained partial consciousness. The marriage agreement must be reviewed. Liana's eyes widened the moment she heard the word marriage. She looked between them, confusion turning into something sharper. Her breathing quickened. Evan stepped toward her bed protectively. Not here, he said firmly. She is waking up. She does not need this right now. But the lawyer did not budge. The Hartwell estate wants confirmation that Mr. Miller is still honoring the contract. Since Miss Hartwell is conscious, she may contest the arrangement if she chooses. Liana's stare grew more intense, fragile but fierce. Her lips parted again, forming a whisper that barely carried. Contract? Evan felt the bottom of his stomach drop. Her voice, quiet, shaky, strained, was the first sound she had made since awakening, and the first word she spoke was contract. The lawyer inhaled sharply, suddenly aware of the moment he had triggered. She should be informed of her legal situation, he insisted. Evan clenched his fists. She is not ready for this. The lawyer scoffed. She has every right to know. Liana's breathing grew uneven. Her eyes darted across the room, trying to piece together a reality she had not chosen. The monitors began to beep more quickly, responding to her rising panic. Stop, Evan said sharply. You are upsetting her. He moved to her side instantly, lowering his voice. Liana, please look at me. You are safe. I promise. She stared at him with a mixture of fear and pleading, her fingers trembling as she reached weakly for his sleeve. He took her hand, grounding her, keeping her focus on him, but it was too late. The seed had been planted. She knew something was wrong, and she knew it involved him. The lawyer stepped back toward the door. I will return when she is more stable. When he left, the room felt colder. Evan sat beside her again, his voice low with guilt. I am sorry, he whispered. You were not supposed to hear it like that. Not yet. Her eyes searched his face, desperate for answers she could not ask with words. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. When you are stronger, I will tell you everything, every truth. Her gaze softened, but confusion still clouded her expression. For the first time since she woke up, she looked at him. Not with trust, not with recognition, but with the quiet fear of someone who realizes the world she opened her eyes to might not be the world she remembers. And Evan knew that the moment she regained her voice, everything would begin to unravel. The next 2 days unfolded with a quiet tension that neither Evan nor Liana could ignore. Her strength continued to grow, her voice returning in faint syllables, her hands moving with more control, her eyes clearer and sharper each morning. But with her returning strength came more questions, and each one hung heavily in the space between them. By the third morning, she could speak short phrases. Her voice was soft, rough from disuse, but it carried an unmistakable determination. When Evan stepped into room 907 with a cup of warm broth, she looked at him with steady eyes. Sit, she whispered. He froze. This was the first full word she had spoken directly to him. He obeyed quietly, setting the cup aside and taking the chair beside her bed. She studied his face, searching for something she could not yet name. Tell truth, she said slowly. The words felt like stones dropped into still water. Evan's chest tightened. He had been waiting for this moment, and dreading it in equal measure. You deserve to know everything, he said softly. But I want you to understand that nothing, absolutely nothing I have done since the moment I met you, was meant to hurt you. She blinked once, urging him to continue. Evan inhaled deeply. They came to me when my mother needed surgery. I had no money, no insurance, no way to save her. Your family's lawyer said they would help if I signed the marriage contract. They wanted stability in the press after your accident. They wanted someone harmless and quiet at your side. His voice cracked. I agreed because I did not know what else to do. Liana's eyes shimmered with something fragile pain mixed with confusion. You marry me for money? She whispered. No, he answered immediately, his voice firm. Not for money, for survival. I never wanted anything from you. I only wanted to keep my mother alive. And I swear I never once touched your life beyond what the contract demanded. Everything I have done for you, being here, reading to you, talking to you, that was real. That had nothing to do with the contract. Her fingers trembled slightly on the blanket. You stay with me, she whispered. Every day. Yes, he said, his voice shaking. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being a responsibility. And you became... He swallowed. You became someone I cared about. The room fell silent. Then she spoke again, her voice clearer than before. Who hurt me? Evan stiffened. Her question cut through the air like a blade. Her memories were returning. That afternoon, during a scheduled scan, she suffered a brief panic attack triggered by flashes of headlights, the screech of metal, and a voice shouting her name before impact. The medical team sedated her lightly, giving her time to breathe. When she awoke hours later, she was calmer, but her eyes held a sharper focus. "Someone wanted me gone," she whispered. Evan nodded slightly, confirming what she already sensed. "The investigation was never complete," he said quietly. "Some details were buried. Some people wanted to make sure the truth stayed hidden." Liana's jaw tightened with a spark of defiance. "I want to know." "You will," Evan promised, "and you will not face it alone." That evening, the Hartwell lawyer tried to visit again, but Liana, still weak yet steady, uttered her first full sentence with force. "I do not want you here." The lawyer left quickly, shaken by her sudden clarity. When the room grew quiet again, Evan returned to her side. She lifted her hand toward him, and he took it gently. "You told truth," she whispered. "I owed you that." Her eyes softened, more sure than they had been since she awoke. "You stay?" He let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "For as long as you want me to." Her fingers curled around his, stronger this time. Outside the window, the city lights flickered like distant stars. The monitors hummed softly. Liana's breathing steadied, and she looked at him not with fear, not with doubt, but with the quiet certainty of someone choosing her next step. Then she whispered, "I want you here when I stand again." Evan nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his chest. And in that gentle, fragile moment, a truth settled between them, not born of contracts or desperation, but from the depth of two lives that had collided in the unlikeliest of ways. She had awakened to his voice, and now she was choosing to face the world with him beside her, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The days that followed felt like a new chapter unfolding in slow, steady breaths. Liana regained more of her voice, more of her strength, and more of the memories that had been buried beneath the fog of the coma. She still grew tired easily, but each time she opened her eyes, her clarity sharpened, and her questions became more precise. She remembered the road, she remembered the headlights, she remembered the fear, and she remembered a voice shouting her name right before everything went dark. But what she did not remember was ever meeting Evan before the accident, and that truth weighed heavily on both of them. One late afternoon, the physical therapist helped her stand for the first time. She leaned on the parallel bars, her legs trembling, sweat beading along her forehead. Evan stood just behind her, ready to catch her if she faltered. "You are doing great," he said softly. "One more step." She took it, her foot pressed against the floor, shaky but sure. Then another step, and another. By the time she sat back down, breathless and exhausted, she reached out for Evan without hesitation. Her fingers curled weakly around his wrist. "You said you would be here," she whispered. "And I meant it," he answered. That night, when the hallway lights dimmed and the hospital quieted, the door opened again, this time to someone neither of them expected. The Hartwell family lawyer stepped inside, holding a thick folder. Evan rose immediately, tense. "She does not want to speak to you." But Liana lifted her hand weakly. "It is all right," she said. Her voice was soft but steady. "I need answers." The lawyer hesitated, then opened the folder. "There were irregularities in the case," he admitted quietly. "Your accident was not fully investigated. Certain board members believed that your incapacitation would increase their control of the company. They had every incentive to ensure the investigation remained incomplete." Evan felt anger rise in his chest. "So they left her vulnerable and used her name to force a contract." The lawyer nodded shamefully. "The contract was designed to protect the company image, not to protect her." Liana closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the truth. When she opened them again, her gaze was sharp. "Cancel it," she said. The lawyer blinked. "You want to annul the marriage?" She looked at Evan, and something softened in her expression. "No," she said, voice firm despite its weakness. "I want to cancel their control, not him." The lawyer swallowed. "You would need to testify once you are fully recovered. You would need to confront the board." "I will," she replied. He nodded and left them alone. When the door clicked shut, Evan lowered himself into the chair beside her bed. "You did not have to defend me," he said quietly. "You owe me nothing." Liana reached for his hand again, stronger this time, her grip warm and deliberate. "You stayed," she whispered. "You cared. Even when you gained nothing." Evan looked down at their joined hands, emotion tightening his chest. "You deserve someone who can give you everything," he said. "I cannot give you much." She held his gaze with surprising strength. "You gave me," a voice again, "a hand to reach for, a reason to wake up." Her breath trembled. "That is everything." There was no dramatic confession, no grand gesture, just the steady, quiet truth connecting them. Weeks later, when she regained enough strength to walk across the room unaided, Evan was there to catch her tears of relief. When she delivered her testimony to the investigators, he stood behind her like a shield. And when the charges were filed against those who had conspired to harm her, she leaned into him with a calm determination. On the day she was discharged from the hospital, she stepped into the sunlight with Evan beside her. Her voice was still soft, but certain. "I want a real beginning," she said. "Only if you want it too." Evan looked at her alive, brave, radiant in her second chance. "I do," he whispered. She slipped her hand into his, not out of obligation, not out of fear, but out of choice. And in that moment, under the warmth of a sky that had watched over their darkest hours, they walked forward two broken lives that had found healing in each other, ready to build something real from everything that tried to break them.